From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to today's program. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. As China's two sessions grab the headlines globally, there are many questions about China's domestic politics, China's domestic policy, but there is even greater interest in China's foreign policy, arguably, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict crosses a year. The U.S. continues sniping at China, and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang holds his first two-sessions press conference. What are China's priorities going forward? To discuss the key points from the Foreign Minister's press conference, as well as the discussions at this year's two sessions, we're joined by Josef Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics at East China Normal University. He's joining us from Shanghai. And also in the studio here in Beijing, we have Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business Economics. Welcome to the program, Professor Liu. First of all, I want to play you a soundbite from Qin Gang's press conference, which is his first as the new Foreign Minister of China.
We are in the first year of fully implementing the guiding principles set forth by the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China. The Congress has outlined top-level plans for China's diplomacy, identified our missions and tasks, and made strategic arrangements to that end. With the COVID situation turning for the better in China, we are steadily resuming exchanges with the world. We've pressed the acceleration button and sounded the clarion call for our diplomacy.
Professor Liu, what are your takeaways from Qin Gang's press conference?
I think it's very inspiring and also very realistic because China is going full gear for the domestic rejuvenation and together in shaping the shared future for mankind. And these grand missions are there to give the clear guidelines as how we can reshape our policy. And first of all, he was saying that we are going forward to strengthen the good neighbor relationship with countries surrounding us. And also we are not only there to set up our own economic agenda, but also help many other, particularly the global south, to really to come on the recovery mode for the past few years suffering, and also that China is there to stand up any global pressure that is imposed on China for its own domestic development and for its own resolve to serve peace and development around the world.
What about its other relations, for example, with the United States? Qin Gang was the former Chinese ambassador to the United States, and he did make some very witty remarks regarding Washington's anti-China rhetorics and actions,
yes,
of course.
I think there's a lot of harsh remarks over this, but from his past speeches, we can see that he recognizes the importance of the bilateral relationship between the two biggest economies, and also that he denounces the exceptionalist policy by the United States. And the U.S. has been proposing the 3C strategies with China, the cooperation, the competition, and the confrontation. And I think the Qin Gang follows very closely of the principles set forth by President Xi and also Wang Yi, by saying that the cooperation is welcome, but must be on a mutual benefit basis, and competition must be healthy, and confrontation should be met with in kind. So therefore, this is very tough but a very pragmatic policy, and this is there to tell the world where is Chinese diplomatic stance, and China is ready and also is capable of defending its core interest.
Joseph, do you expect any change at all, now that Qin Gang is the new head of the Chinese Foreign Ministry? What messages did you pick up about from his press conference?
I don't expect major changes. I expect a lot of continuity. But one of the things that he emphasized repeatedly was China's opposition to a Cold War mentality. Second, one of his most positive messages came when he discussed the lessons that Chinese modernization offers the developing world, including bursting the myth that modernization equates with Westernization and instead proves that countries can choose a path rooted in their own culture, values and needs, reinforcing their own sovereignty and independence. But third, perhaps his strongest remarks came on the Taiwan question, where he said that the U.S. talks again and again about the sovereignty and security of Ukraine, but violates Chinese sovereignty and security in Taiwan. The U.S. says it's wrong for any country to sell weapons to Russia, but then sells weapons to Taiwan in violation of international agreements. And the U.S. talks again and again about promoting peace and security in Asia while, quote, covertly formulating a plan for the destruction of Taiwan. Now, that's a very powerful and provocative statement, one that should be much discussed in Asia and beyond.
Yeah, that was a very witty statement from Qin Gang, saying that the U.S. is violating the 1982 joint communique, otherwise known as the Baocheng joint communique, stating that the U.S. will winding down its weapons sales in scale and in numbers to Taiwan, to the region of Taiwan. But in reality, it is doing the opposite. And he's comparing that to America's opposition and America's assumption that China is potentially sending weapons to Moscow.
That's right.
Well, I think, time and again, the United States claimed that, the world should be there to play by the rule. And China states and said, okay, where are the rules, for the bilateral relationship in the first place? It is the communiques that we have reached, and it is the obligation of each party to respect the commitment. So therefore, continuously meddling in Chinese domestic affairs is really a default on the commitment, and also is going to cause a major catastrophe if further action is going to be there to take place.
There have been wide speculation about the timing of China's potential action towards Taiwan, be it peaceful reunification, or as Qin Gang has put it, China reserve all rights, the right to have all options on the table. There have been wide speculation on whether it could be 2025 or 2027, whereby an operation might be launched towards that end. What do you make of Qin Gang's remarks regarding Beijing's will and resolve towards Taiwan reunification? Any new messages?
Well, the message is that it's very clear that we are one family, and we are rejecting any type of external forces that are there to interfere the unification process. And just because we are the one family, the military action is really the last resort. Of course, we cannot really forfeit. But in the meantime, to harmonize the economic, cultural, and family type of relationship is the way to go at the moment. So we are not there to destroy Taiwan, but to offer Taiwan the prosperity and also the harmony with the big family of the Chinese people.
Yeah, Joseph, Qin Gang, the Chinese foreign minister, repeatedly said that Washington is in fact playing the Taiwan card, right? Understanding only too well from the American elites about the root causes of the Taiwan crisis, the root causes. How does this Taiwan question come about in the first place? Yet, Washington still does not refrain itself from using Taiwan as, what Beijing calls an unsinkable aircraft carrier, for the past decades. What do you make of that? Do you think this trend can stop in the foreseeable future, given the political dynamics in Washington these days?
Unfortunately, I don't see the trend stopping. I see it accelerating, whether it's the expansion of a U.S. military presence in the Philippines, which I have to assume is some sort of staging ground for a possible conflict with China over Taiwan. Maybe even something, there's a lot of speculation that the U.S. might deliberately provoke something, that the model here is what we saw with the U.S. Expanding NATO and expanding small bloc alliances in Europe to the point where it did play a significant role in provoking the conflict that we now see between Russia and Ukraine. So there's some concern here. But to go back and to clarify for your audience, this speculation that China might initiate hostilities against Taiwan in 2025 or 2027, this is wholly the stuff of American fantasy. This is what's being discussed by American conservatives who want to induce this sort of hysteric response and to promote U.S. policy to being more aggressive, to expanding its military presence in China in ways that further destabilize. So unfortunately, that's the broader narrative and the broader trend, and I can only expect it's going to accelerate given what we've seen over the last 2 years with Biden and before him with Trump, and what we can certainly expect as we continue this sick game of twisted American domestic politics, where these two parties can only agree on this anti-China narrative, but then compete to see who can be the toughest anti-China party in U.S. elections. And that's the trend, and that's what we'll see in the run-up to the next presidential election.
Yeah. There's a pattern here, Professor Liu. For example, China has received visiting heads of state from Turkmenistan, Belarus, Iran, the Philippines, among others, and Cambodia, of course. And China's senior diplomat Wang Yi went to several European countries and Russia recently. How do you interpret these different visits? Is there an underlying pattern?
Well, the underlying pattern is that under the general framework of shaping the shared future for mankind, and China is there to build strategic dialogues with many of those partners in terms of security and prosperity. For example, the G20 attended by President Xi sends a very strong message to the world that we are very much resolved to solve the global issues and strengthen the governance together on equal basis, working with all the participating members. And the regional security is now being being threatened by the geopolitical conflicts. So therefore, how China is going to help to shape a better environment for businesses and for people's lives. So China is really realistically contributing over that. And also for the strategic supply of energy, raw materials, China has really shaped a strong relationship now with the Gulf countries, and also proposing to have more of the peaceful settlement over a number of regional conflicts. So this is what China really are there doing. So despite of the disturbance of the pandemic, despite of some of the obstructions proposed by the United States, so China is winning the credentials among the partners, and also China's experience is being more and more understood as something that is inspiring to help many other countries to move on recovery and also on prosperity.
Yeah, if you look at some polls, for example, in Latin America and across the MENA world, Middle East and North Africa world, positive perception towards China have been steadily rising, of course. This is not often reported, because in Western Europe and North America, the opposite is true. So people thought and assumed that the public's perception towards China had been overwhelmingly negative. In fact, that it's only the situation in parts of the world.
Yeah, I think the people can see that who is really delivering the tangible benefits. For example, United States has been weaving the Indo-Pacific Economic Partnership, but what have they done? They are selling more weapons and proposing more of the military bases, but China is there to build the abandoned Jakarta railway, and China is there to build the China-Laos railway network, and the metro in Myanmar, the metro in Thailand, and shipping there, the trading ports, and build better connectivity. So rhetorics cannot really convince people, and also threat can only twist some of the convictions. But in the end, it is really the benefit, and more importantly, I think, the respect of each other's specific situation and institution is there to be further welcomed, and that's something we go for: sustainable relationship.
Joseph, Qin Gang singled out two major diplomatic events taking place in China later this year. One is the China Central Asian Summit, and the other one is the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative, officially known as the BRI, International Cooperation Forum. Why do you think China highlights those two events?
Well, it's clear that China is going to be returning, I think, much more strongly to the Belt Road. We know that the COVID was distracting to all of us, not just China, but the rest of the world. And we know that Central Asia remains both a security concern, but also a development opportunity, not only for the Central Asians, but also for the surrounding countries with whom China has positive relations. So it's going to be an opportunity to advance those initiatives associated with the Belt Road, which will extend infrastructure in ways that help develop those local economies, but also extend China's capacity to trade and to develop its own economy, but also to branch over more effectively to Europe and to the Middle East. And we know that this is part of an overall far-flung plan to not only develop these interests just in Central Asia, but far beyond. So I think that this is returning once again to efforts that were already underway, but now will be reinvigorated.
Yeah, Professor Liu.
Yeah, I very much concur with the statement once Jack Ma made during Davos, is that when trade stops, war begins. So trade in connectivity, particularly the Belt and Road, we really can see that over the past 10 years, there's been huge success. It is termed by many of the government officials that participate in such a program as a belt for connectivity and friendship and road towards prosperity. So it is there, during the pandemic, nearly 1 million Chinese people are working on construction sites across the Belt and Road. We have 144 Belt and Road countries who are really benefiting from it. And also during the pandemic, China opened the Green Lane for facilitating the imports of agricultural produce from the Belt and Road countries, and particularly from the lesser developed countries from the sub-Saharan African continent. And also that the Chinese overseas investment are on a rapid increase, despite of some of the hurdles, either through the domestic civil war in some of the regions, and also the pandemic disturbance. So we are really very resolved. So we in Chinese we say that the long road tests the power of the house. So now the power of the house is being tested and also being recognized.
Yeah, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the war in Ukraine, which has been lingering for over a year now. Joseph, some reports and some commentators say that the Ukraine conflict has made it easier for the United States to isolate China in the Pacific. Do you look at that way? I mean, is China isolated in its refusal to sanction Russia, or does the developing South also share this same sentiment?
Well, it's clear that the conflict in Ukraine has created numerous strategic opportunities for the U.S. to exploit, but I think we see these primarily in Europe. There are reports that Biden's advisors are actually split on the U.S. Reinvesting so heavily in NATO and Ukraine, with some believing that it's drawing resources and attention away from the so-called pivot to Asia, while others hold that the opportunity to discipline Europe and knock back Russia are cornerstones for increasingly isolating China and choking its economy and development. Now, this latter group also envisions this expanded NATO eventually confronting China directly, which is not only a concern for Beijing, but for European capitals who want to avoid being drawn into a new zero-sum Cold War led by the U.S. But I think we need to realize that the global South is neither naive, and this includes the Pacific, is neither naive nor without options. Developing countries realize the U.S. is provocative, they realize it's in decline, and even in the best of circumstances, that the U.S. is an unreliable partner. Now, a lot of developing countries are trying to avoid themselves being drawn into choosing sides, while also trying to maximize advantages of positive relations with both countries, in part to hedge against uncertainties, but also with the realization that American hegemony, most likely dollar hegemony, is facing an existential risk with many potential spillovers in the years to come. So we're in the midst presently of a massive geostrategic realignment, one that's only going to get bigger. where China is and will remain a major, if not decisive player. And those who fail to acknowledge this or who simply blindly follow Washington against Beijing are compounding future risk. And this is above all true with smaller countries in the Pacific region.
Yeah, many smaller countries feel obliged to pick sides every now and then, but in fact, they don't want to do that. That's the last thing that they wanted. Professor Liu, talking about the Ukraine conflict, we've seen some, pre-circle of an arms race, if you will. Japan is doubling its defense spending, and India and South Korea have also announced upping their military budget. Is that a cause for concern? Do you think Ukraine might be used by politicians in the West to only play up this China fear-mongering and used to contain China further?
Well, I think this is going to have a long-lasting impact, even if after the war ends in whatever way, because you can see that after the Second World War, the whole world was really guarding against the Nazis' rejuvenation and also the revitalization of the Japan's military might, and from the military, the basis of the United States. We can see that. But now situation has changed, attitude has changed, and we can also see that China does feel the thrill because the Japan is being supported by the United States to further add up their military might, which can be a potential danger in Asia, and also that can also cause a lot of concerns over the global supply chain from energy to end products, and particularly for high-tech transference. And then China is there to make it very clear that peaceful settlements through dialogue is the way out, and any type of economic sanctions, you can only inflate the war, but in the meantime really endanger more of the civilians instead of stopping the politicians or warmongers. And right now, I think the China remains a very firm stance, and we are actively proposing the peaceful settlement, the programs, and hopefully the world can listen very carefully, and this is really the beneficial approach instead of instigating or inflating the situation.
At the press conference held by the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang, a question was asked to him about whether more tense relations with Washington will mean better relations between China and the European Union. What do you make of that?
Well, China is not really shopping for favors, either with Europe or with North America. China is there to forge a more constructive and conducive relationship with both of them, because they stand on the top three of the Chinese trading partners, and particularly many of those high technologies are still something that can really support China's further growth for high quality development. And now we can see that China is attaching more of the importance in economic ties with Europe when we face the cold current with the United States. So last year we placed a stunning order for Airbus, and we can also see that many European leaders are seeing that given the challenge proposed by the Ukraine crisis, and also given the pressure of the United States, so they actually tend to prone more to work closely with China. And you can see that during recent incidents of the ASML refused to sell the DUVs to China, they clearly indicate that this is really yielding to the United States pressure. But in the end, either that they're going to break through such sort of embargo, or supporting China to really do it on their own. So therefore, the Europeans are more realistic, and they see a longer term in terms of relationship with China as compared with the United States. So that's something that a strategic opportunity for China to further step up our relationship. And one very concrete one is that how we can really recalibrate the CEI, the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment between China and the United States.
It was frozen by the European Parliament.
That's right. So I think both sides need to make more of the constructive efforts to really, because all the terms are already concluded, is how politicians can really see longer benefits for their own people, for their national interest, to quickly put this into real practice.
Yeah, to characterize China's influence in the world these days, Josef, Qin Gang said,
China should be the last one to be accused of the so-called debt trap. Data shows that multilateral financial institutions and commercial creditors account for over 80% of the sovereign debt of developing countries. They are the biggest source of the debt burden on developing countries, particularly since last year. The unprecedented, rapid interest hikes by the U.S. has led to massive capital outflows in many countries and worsened the debt problems in countries concerned.
What do you think?
Well, study after study has debunked the debt trap myth. Even in the most recent examples trumpeted by Washington, for example, Sri Lanka and Zambia, China was not the biggest player, nor unwilling to structure, nor seeking to exploit difficult circumstances the way Western bondholders were. Second, numerous studies conducted by the World Bank estimate the BRI can boost trade flows in the 149 participating countries by 4.1%, as well as cutting the cost of global trade by 1.1 to 2.2%. So the World Bank also estimates that the BRI will help grow East Asian and Pacific developing countries' GDPs by an average of 2.6 to 3.9%, while other studies indicate the BRI can help lead global GDP increases of 7.1 trillion per annum by 2040. In short, BRI is a global development godsend, not some dark plot to impoverish others, above all the global South.
Yeah, what do you think, Professor Liu?
Yeah, I think as a matter of fact that what China is doing really is to help to alleviate many of those debt burdens suffered by global investors and global financial institutions, because after all, how to fill the debt hole? It is really the economic growth. It is their export drive. So China's BRI is there to first to set up more of the infrastructure to facilitate trade, and also to help the local capacity to raise more of their local produce, and that's the way to pay back the money. So I think the those lenders who are really suffering from it, well, including some part of the Chinese institutions, though, should be grateful to China's the Belt and Road program, because this is there to help them to have hope instead of despair. When people are driven in despair, then they just are there to write off. Now you can offer concessions and haircuts, but to help them to stand on their own feet, to survive and keep afloat before they can really have the energy, have the power to pay back the money, and also give their people a better and suitable life.
Yeah, development and security are so intertwined. And I want to remind our viewers from around the world that if you want to watch Qin Gang, the Chinese Foreign Minister's press conference, in its entirety, you can always download the CGTN app or go to the CGTN website at www.cgtn.com. And that would do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing.